I rolled into Free City Autos and immediately felt the shift in the room. Conversations stopped. Eyes followed me. And then a salesman approached. A thin, greasy-haired man whose name tag read, Paul.
Can I help you with something? Because if you're just looking around, we're pretty busy today.
I'm interested in purchasing a vehicle. I'd like to see what you have available.
Look, lady, I don't want to waste your time or mine. Cars are expensive, and most people like you are just window shopping. Maybe you should try the used lot down the street.
I assure you, money isn't an issue. I'd like to see your inventory.
Money isn't an issue? Right. Listen, sweetheart, I've been doing this for 10 years, and I can tell when someone's serious and when they're just playing pretend. Someone as useless as you probably shouldn't even have a license.
The word useless hit me like a physical blow, but I'd been here before. I took a deep breath and straightened my spine. I want to speak to your manager. Now.
Oh, you want to speak to the manager? Classic. Let me guess. You're going to complain about the big, mean salesman?
Paul walked away, laughing and shaking his head. They say money can't buy happiness, but it sure can buy justice. My name is Rachel, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes when the world treats you like you're less than human, you have to show them exactly who has the power. I was 7 years old when the accident happened. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit the car I was riding in with my parents. They walked away with minor injuries. I didn't. The doctor said I'd never walk again, and they were right. But what they couldn't predict was how that wheelchair would become both my greatest challenge and eventually my greatest weapon. Growing up was hell. Kids can be cruel, but adults are worse because they should know better. I lost count of how many times people talked over me, around me, or about me like I wasn't even there. Store clerks would address my parents instead of me when I was trying to buy something. Strangers would either stare or go out of their way to avoid looking at me at all. But I had something they didn't expect. A brain that could see patterns where others saw chaos. While other kids were playing video games, I was reading about the stock market. While they were at parties, I was studying investment strategies. By the time I was 18, I'd turned a small inheritance from my grandmother into a six-figure portfolio. By 25, I was a millionaire. By 30, I had enough money to buy and sell half the businesses in town. But success felt hollow when I was experiencing it alone. That's why I decided to use my money for something that mattered. I bought an old community center downtown and renovated it specifically for people with disabilities. It wasn't charity. It was creating a space where people like me could exist without constantly having to prove our worth. That's where I met James and Gunther. James had been born with cerebral palsy, and Gunther had lost his legs in a military accident overseas. Despite our different circumstances, we understood each other in a way that people without disabilities never could. We'd meet every Tuesday for coffee and conversation, sharing stories about our week and supporting each other through the daily frustrations of living in a world that wasn't built for us. But one Tuesday, both of them arrived looking defeated.
I had the worst experience yesterday. I went to that dealership on 5th Street, Free City Autos, to buy a car. The salesman took one look at me and treated me like crap. No way, I was just there too. A week ago, but same treatment. They acted like I was wasting their time just by rolling through the door.
I felt my jaw clench as they described how the staff had been dismissive, condescending, and downright cruel. James said a salesman had actually suggested he reconsider whether he really needed a car. Gunther told me they'd made jokes about special accommodations right in front of him. I had heard of that place. Big, flashy, always advertising on the radio about their premium service and family values. Apparently, their definition of family didn't include people like us. The next day, I decided to see for myself. I wore designer clothes, expensive jewelry, the works. Not that it mattered once they saw the wheelchair. I rolled into Free City Autos and immediately felt the shift in the room. Conversations stopped. Eyes followed me. And then a salesman approached. A thin, greasy-haired man whose name tag read, Paul.
Can I help you with something? Because if you're just looking around, we're pretty busy today.
I'm interested in purchasing a vehicle. I'd like to see what you have available.
Look, lady, I don't want to waste your time or mine. Cars are expensive, and most people like you are just window shopping. Maybe you should try the used lot down the street.
I assure you, money isn't an issue. I'd like to see your inventory.
Money isn't an issue? Right. Listen, sweetheart, I've been doing this for 10 years, and I can tell when someone's serious and when they're just playing pretend. Someone as useless as you probably shouldn't even have a license.
The word useless hit me like a physical blow, but I'd been here before. I took a deep breath and straightened my spine. I want to speak to your manager. Now,
Oh, you want to speak to the manager? Classic. Let me guess. You're going to complain about the big, mean salesman?
Paul walked away, laughing and shaking his head. A few minutes later, he returned with a heavy-set man in his 40s wearing a cheap suit and a nastier expression.
John, this lady wants to complain about me. Apparently, I hurt her feelings. What seems to be the problem here, miss?
Your employee has been incredibly rude and discriminatory. I came here to purchase a vehicle, and I've been treated with nothing but disrespect.
Well, maybe if you were realistic about your limitations, this wouldn't be an issue. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. This is a business, not a charity. We sell cars to people who can actually drive them properly. Exactly. What's next? We're supposed to install training wheels?
They both laughed at Paul's joke, and something inside me snapped. These men weren't just being rude. They were being deliberately cruel, taking pleasure in my humiliation. I've heard enough. This is disgusting behavior, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows about it.
Oh, we're real scared. What are you going to do, roll over our feet?
Before I could respond, John grabbed the handles of my wheelchair without permission, the ultimate violation of a disabled person's autonomy, and began pushing me toward the exit. I tried to protest, but he ignored me completely.
Time for you to go. And don't bother coming back. We don't serve your type here.
As he pushed me out the front door, there were 3 concrete steps leading down to the sidewalk. Instead of helping me navigate them safely, John gave my chair a hard shove. I tumbled forward, the wheelchair tipping, and I fell face first onto the concrete. Pain shot through my hands and face as I hit the ground, and I heard John laughing behind me. A woman walking by immediately rushed to help me, lifting me back into my wheelchair and checking to make sure I wasn't seriously hurt.
Are you okay? I saw what happened. That man assaulted you. I'll be a witness if you want to press charges.
Thank you. I'm going to remember that. I took her information and thanked her, but I wasn't thinking about police reports just yet. I was thinking about something much more permanent. I drove straight to the bank where I did most of my business. When you have enough money, banks treat you very differently. Within minutes, I was sitting across from their senior account manager, Margaret. Margaret, I need you to find out who owns Free City Autos on 5th Street, and I need to know if they'd be interested in selling.
That's an interesting request, Rachel. Let me make some calls.
It turned out that Free City Autos was owned by a 70-year-old man named Frank Douglas, who'd been looking to retire but couldn't find a buyer. Margaret knew him personally and arranged a meeting for the next day. The next day, Frank met with me and asked why I was interested in buying the dealership. Being honest, I told him I had a very poor customer service experience there recently, and I think the business could use new management. He sighed heavily and made an attempt to apologize, but I cut him off and told him that it was too late for such things. He then asked what I was offering, to which I told him that I would pay whatever price he had in mind, plus I would pay 20% above that. The only condition is that the sale needed to remain a secret until after it was complete. Frank nearly choked on his coffee. He named a figure, I added 20%, and we had a deal. Within a week, all the paperwork was signed, and I owned Free City Autos. But John and Paul didn't know that yet. I hired 2 security guards and returned to the dealership exactly 1 week after they'd humiliated me. I found Paul first, leaning against a car and talking on his phone. "Excuse me, Paul, I'd like to buy a car today."
Oh, you've got to be kidding me. I thought we made it clear you weren't welcome here.
John appeared from across the lot, recognizing my voice.
What's this lunatic doing back here? I thought I told you not to come back.
"I'm here to make a purchase. Will you sell me a car or not?"
Lady, you could bring a dozen bodyguards, and we still wouldn't sell a useless cripple like you a car. This is a respectable business.
That's really unfortunate. Because you're both fired.
Fired? Who the hell do you think you are?
I pulled out the deed to the dealership and held it up for them to see. "I'm the new owner. Frank sold this place to me. I'm your new boss. And my first executive decision is to terminate your employment, effective immediately." The color drained from both their faces as they realized what had happened. Paul grabbed the deed from my hands, reading it frantically.
This is impossible. This is some kind of trick. You can't do this to us. We've worked here for years.
I can, and I have. Security will escort you off the property now. That's when they both snapped. John lunged toward me, his face twisted with rage, while Paul circled around my other side. The security guards I'd hired immediately stepped in. There was a brief struggle, and I heard Paul scream as one of the guards punched and twisted his arm to subdue him. The sound of bone breaking was unmistakable.
My arm. You broke my arm.
The guards escorted both men off the property while Paul cradled his broken arm and John cursed at me with every step. But I wasn't done with them yet. I called the police and filed trespassing charges against both men. When the officers arrived, they found John and Paul trying to break back into the building through a side door, apparently thinking they could retrieve their personal belongings. The arrest was swift and satisfying. The next day, I went to the police station and filed assault charges against John for what he'd done to me the week before. The witness I'd met that day came forward exactly as she'd promised, and her testimony was damning. A month later, both men stood before a judge. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage of them attacking me, witness testimony of the assault, and documentation of their trespassing. They were each sentenced to a year in prison. But a year wasn't enough for me. Not after a lifetime of people like them making people like me feel worthless. While they were in prison, I made some calls. I contacted every car dealership in our city and the 3 neighboring cities. I told them the story of what John and Paul had done, complete with documentation and news articles about their convictions. By the time they were released, they were blacklisted from every dealership within a 100-mile radius. When they finally got out of prison, they were desperate. Both men eventually found work at a small coffee shop called Hometown Brew. It took me exactly 2 days to find out where they were working. I paid a visit to the owner, a sweet older woman named Dorothy. I told her the whole story, showed her the news articles, and even brought photos of my injuries from when John had pushed me down the stairs. Dorothy was horrified. They were fired that same day. Word got back to me that John and Paul were furious, convinced that I was somehow stalking them. So I decided to make myself clear. I found them both at a bar downtown and approached their table. Gentlemen, I hear you're looking for work again.
You psycho. You're ruining our lives. This is harassment. We'll call the police.
Go ahead. But here's the thing. I have more money than both of you will ever see in your lifetimes. And I have a very long memory. No matter where you go, no matter who hires you, I will make sure they know exactly what kind of people you are. I will dedicate as much time and resources as it takes to ensure that you never forget how it feels to be treated like you're worthless. Within a month, both men had left the country. John moved to Canada, Paul to Mexico. They'd rather start over in a foreign country than continue to deal with the consequences of their actions. Some people might say I went too far, that my revenge was petty, that I should have just moved on with my life. But they don't understand what it's like to spend every day of your life being treated as less than human simply because of how your body works. For 30 years, I'd absorbed every cruel comment, every dismissive look, every act of casual discrimination. John and Paul weren't just 2 random jerks. They were representatives of every person who'd ever made me feel small, worthless, or invisible. I didn't destroy their lives out of pure spite. I did it to send a message. People with disabilities aren't helpless victims you can abuse without consequences. We have power too, and sometimes we need to use it. My community center is thriving now. James bought a beautiful car from the new management at Free City Autos, which I completely reorganized to be disability-friendly. Gunther did too. We still meet every Tuesday, but now our conversations are about possibilities rather than problems. Thanks for watching.